The sharks came on the second day. That's what people always want to know about. Not the torpedoes, not watching the ship go down, not the 900 men screaming in the water. They want to know about the sharks. I'll tell you about the sharks. But first, you need to understand what we were doing out there, alone in the Philippine Sea in the summer of 1945. My name is Robert Mitchell. I was 19 years old, seaman first class, assigned to the USS Indianapolis, heavy cruiser, flagship of the Fifth Fleet. We were good sailors on a good ship, and we'd been through hell together, kamikazes at Okinawa, the whole Pacific campaign. By July of 45, we thought we'd earned some luck. We'd just completed a secret mission. They didn't tell us what we were carrying, but the security was tighter than anything I'd ever seen. Marines guarding a crate in the hangar bay, officers who wouldn't even look at it. We delivered it to Tinian Island on July 26th. Later, after Hiroshima, we found out what it was. Parts for the atomic bomb. We were proud of that mission. Thought we'd helped end the war. Thought we were doing something important. After Tinian, we were ordered to Leyte Gulf in the Philippines for training exercises. Just a routine voyage. No destroyer escort. They said we didn't need one, said we'd be fine on our own. The ship could make good speed, and the war was almost over anyway. Japan was finished. I remember that last night, July 29th. I had the evening watch, stood on deck watching the sun go down. The ocean was calm, almost peaceful. Some of the guys were playing cards below deck. Others were writing letters home. Johnson from Texas was talking about his girl, how he was going to marry her the minute we got back to San Diego. The air was hot and sticky, but there was a breeze coming off the water. I remember thinking it was a beautiful night. Clear sky, full of stars. The kind of night that makes you forget there's a war on. I went off watch at midnight, headed below to my bunk, thinking about getting some sleep before my next shift. I never made it to my bunk. At 12 minutes past midnight on July 30th, 1945, 2 Japanese torpedoes slammed into the starboard side of the USS Indianapolis, and my world ended. The first explosion threw me against a bulkhead. I didn't hear it so much as feel it. A massive concussion that went through the entire ship, through your bones, through your teeth. The lights went out. Then came the screaming. I was in a passageway when the second torpedo hit. The whole ship lurched, tilted. Men were running, shouting, trying to find their way in the dark. Emergency lights flickered on, red and dim, making everything look like a nightmare. "Torpedoes! We've been hit!" Someone was yelling. Water was already rushing in. I could hear it, roaring through the hull like a living thing. I made it to the main deck. The ship was listing badly to starboard, already going down by the bow. I could see the damage, a huge hole torn in the side, metal twisted like paper. Fire was spreading from the forward compartments. Men were pouring out of the hatches. Some of them burned, some of them torn up by the blast. The captain gave the order to abandon ship, but the communications were out. Most of the men below never got the word. They went down with the ship, trapped in those compartments as the water rushed in. I grabbed a life jacket. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely tie it on. The deck was tilting more and more. We were going down fast, too fast. "Get in the water. She's going." Chief Petty Officer McVeigh was shouting, trying to get men over the side. "Jump clear of the ship." I climbed over the rail, looked down at that black water. Seemed like 100 feet, though it couldn't have been more than 30. Men were already in the water, swimming away from the ship. I jumped, hit the water hard, went under. The life jacket pulled me back up, and I started swimming, trying to get away before the suction pulled me down with the ship. I turned back to look. The Indianapolis was standing almost vertical, bow already under, stern rising up out of the water like some kind of monument. Men were sliding down the deck, falling off into the ocean. I could see silhouettes against the flames, could hear them screaming. 12 minutes. That's all it took. 12 minutes from the first torpedo to the moment the ship went under. I watched her go, watched her slide beneath the surface, taking 300 men with her. The suction did pull some swimmers down. I felt it tugging at me, dragging me toward where the ship had been. I kicked and fought and somehow stayed on the surface. Then she was gone. The USS Indianapolis, veteran of countless battles, survivor of kamikaze attacks, disappeared into the Philippine Sea. And 900 of us were left floating in the dark in the middle of the ocean with no rescue coming, because nobody knew we'd been hit. Nobody knew we were out there. That first night was chaos. Men calling out in the darkness, trying to find each other, trying to stay together. Some had life jackets, some didn't. Some were wounded, bleeding into the water. Some were burned so badly you couldn't recognize them. We tried to form groups, to stay together. Strength in numbers, we thought. My group had maybe 40, 50 men. We tied ourselves together with rope, with belts, with anything we could find. Held onto floating debris, wooden planks, empty shell casings, anything that would keep us afloat. The water was warm. That was a blessing at first. But it was also full of fuel oil from the ship. Thick, black oil that got in your mouth, your nose, your eyes. Made you sick. Made you want to vomit. But you couldn't, because there was nothing in your stomach. When the sun came up, we could see how bad it was. Men spread out across the ocean as far as you could see. Some groups were bigger than ours. Some were just individual sailors floating alone. We could see the wounded ones floating face down, already dead. And we could see the sharks. They came with the dawn. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Oceanic whitetips mostly. Big ones. 8, 10 feet long. They circled us, their fins cutting through the water. At first, they went for the dead. We watched them take the bodies, drag them under. It was horrible, but part of us was relieved. Maybe they'd be satisfied with the dead. Maybe they'd leave the living alone. We were wrong. The first living man taken was a kid named Patterson. He was wounded, bleeding from shrapnel wounds in his leg. The blood in the water drew them. 1 minute he was there, holding on to our group. The next minute he screamed and disappeared under the water. Just gone. That's when we understood. We were prey. We were in their territory, and we were weak, and they were going to pick us off one by one. The sharks would bump you first, test you, brush against your legs to see if you'd react. If you splashed, if you panicked, they'd attack. We learned to stay still, to barely breathe, to play dead, even though you were screaming inside. But you can't stay still forever. Eventually you'd move, and they'd come. I saw men taken, saw them pulled under, saw the water turn red, heard them screaming. Some of them would surface again, torn open, dying. Others just disappeared and never came back. Johnson from Texas, the one who was going to marry his girl. A shark got him on the second day. He fought it, punched it in the nose like they tell you to do. It let him go for a second, then came back with others. They tore him apart while we watched. We couldn't help him, couldn't do anything. We just held on to our group and tried not to be next. The sun was merciless. It beat down on us, blistering our skin, cooking us alive. The salt water made it worse. Your skin would crack and bleed, and the blood would draw more sharks. And we were thirsty. God, we were thirsty. Surrounded by water, but couldn't drink a drop. Some men did drink the seawater. We tried to stop them, but they were out of their minds. Salt water makes you crazy, makes you hallucinate. They'd see things that weren't there, islands, ships, freshwater fountains. They'd swim away from the group, chasing their visions. The sharks got them all. By the end of the second day, half our group was gone. Time stopped meaning anything. Was it the third day? Fourth? I couldn't tell anymore. The days blurred together into endless sun and thirst and fear. The hallucinations got worse. I'd see the Indianapolis floating on the horizon, pristine and whole. I'd see rescue ships that weren't there. Once, I was convinced there was a hotel just below the surface. I could see the lights, hear music, smell food. I almost dove down to swim to it. The man next to me grabbed my arm, held me back, saved my life. Others weren't so lucky. Men would suddenly announce they were going below deck for a drink. They'd slip out of their life jackets and dive down, swimming for a ship that had been at the bottom of the ocean for 3 days. They'd never come back up. Some men just gave up, gave themselves to the ocean, let go of whatever they were holding on to and drifted away, face down in the water, done with fighting. I don't blame them. God help me. There were moments I wanted to do the same. The oil was the worst. It was in everything. Coated your skin, filled your mouth, choked your lungs. Some men died from swallowing it, just poisoned themselves slowly, day by day. And always, always the sharks. They never left. They'd learned we were easy prey. They'd come in the late afternoon when we were weakest, when the sun had beaten us down into barely conscious lumps of meat. They'd circle, select their target, attack. You could tell when someone was about to be taken. They'd get this look, empty, resigned. They'd stop fighting, and the sharks knew. They could sense it. By the 4th day, I was down to maybe 15 men in my group. We didn't talk anymore, didn't have the energy, just floated there, holding on, waiting. Some of the men went mad, not hallucinating, actually insane. They'd attack each other, trying to steal life jackets, fighting over nothing. I saw 2 men drown each other, both of them so crazed they pulled each other under and neither came back up. The thirst was torture. Your tongue swells up, your throat closes. You can't swallow. Every breath feels like inhaling fire. Some men tried to drink their own urine. It didn't help, just made them sicker. I prayed like I'd never prayed in my life, begged God to send someone to find us, begged him to just let me die if no one was coming, prayed for my mother, that she wouldn't suffer too much when they told her I was gone. But nobody came. The sky was empty. The ocean was empty except for us and the sharks. 4 days and 4 nights in the water and still no rescue. We'd been forgotten. It was late on the 4th day when I saw it. A plane. A real plane, not a hallucination. At first, I thought I was seeing things again, didn't trust my eyes, but the other men saw it too. We started screaming, waving our arms. The plane was flying high, probably didn't even see us. Just a routine patrol, not looking for survivors because nobody knew we were missing. It flew right over us and kept going. That broke something in all of us. We'd held on for so long thinking rescue was coming, thinking someone would notice we hadn't reached Leyte Gulf. But nobody was looking. Nobody cared. We were going to die out here, and our families would never know what happened. I stopped caring about the sharks, stopped caring about anything. Just floated there, waiting for it to end. But a few hours later, that same plane came back, flying lower this time, circling. The pilot had seen something, oil slick, debris, bodies. Something made him look closer. He saw us, dropped a marker, radioed for help. When we saw him circle back, saw him drop that marker, we knew. Rescue was coming. After 4.5 days in the water, someone finally knew we were there. But we were in bad shape. Most of us couldn't even swim anymore. We just floated, barely conscious, waiting. Some men died in those last hours, right before rescue arrived. Held on as long as they could, then let go just before salvation came. The ships arrived that evening. The USS Cecil J. Doyle, others following. They put searchlights in the water, lit up the ocean, started pulling men out. I remember being hauled up onto the deck, couldn't stand, couldn't speak. My skin was burned black, covered in oil. I'd lost maybe 40 pounds. My lips were cracked and bleeding. My throat was so swollen I could barely breathe. A sailor gave me water. Just a sip. They had to be careful. Your body can't handle much after that kind of dehydration. That sip of fresh water was the most beautiful thing I'd ever tasted. They pulled out 316 survivors. Out of nearly 1,200 men who'd been on the Indianapolis, more than 800 dead. Some went down with the ship. Most died in the water, drowned, sharks, dehydration, exposure, madness. The rescue took all night. We kept hearing them call out numbers as they pulled men from the water. Another one here. Got a live one, but also, this one's gone. Dead. Too late. Johnson from Texas wasn't among the survivors. Neither was Patterson. Neither were most of the men from my group. I'd survived, but I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a ghost. They brought us to a hospital in Guam. 14 years later, I still remember the taste of that first real meal. Couldn't eat much. Our stomachs had shrunk. Our bodies were wrecked. But God, it tasted like heaven. The physical recovery took months. Burns, dehydration, infections from the salt water and oil. Some men lost fingers, toes to the sharks. Some were blinded by the sun and salt. I was lucky, they said. Just severe sunburn, malnutrition, some infections. I'd heal. But the doctors couldn't do anything about what happened in my head. The nightmares started in the hospital. I'd dream I was back in the water. Feel the sharks bumping against my legs. Taste the oil. Hear the screaming. I'd wake up thrashing, shouting, and the nurses would have to hold me down. Couldn't take baths, still can't. The feeling of water closing over me, I panic. Showers only, and even those are hard. I stand under the spray and I'm back in the Pacific waiting for the sharks. Can't swim anymore either. Used to love swimming before the war. Now I can't even look at the ocean without my hands shaking. The Navy held an inquiry. Tried to blame Captain McVeigh for the sinking. Court-martialed him for failing to zigzag, for not doing enough to save the ship. It was bullshit, complete bullshit. He wasn't given an escort. He wasn't told about enemy submarine activity in the area. And the Navy didn't even notice we were missing. Nobody sent a search party when we failed to arrive at Leyte Gulf. But they needed someone to blame. Easier to blame one captain than admit the Navy had screwed up. McVeigh was acquitted of most charges, but it didn't matter. The stigma destroyed him. Some of the survivors, families of dead sailors, they blamed him too. Sent him hate mail, death threats. He carried that weight for years. In 1968, Captain McVeigh put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. The Indianapolis finally claimed him too. I went home to Ohio in October of 1945. My family was so happy to see me. They'd been told I was missing, presumed dead. Then they got word I'd survived. My mother said it was a miracle. I didn't feel like a miracle. I felt like I'd been given something I didn't deserve. 800 men died, and I lived. Why? What made me special? Why did I get to come home when Johnson didn't? When Patterson didn't? I got married in 1950. Helen's a good woman, patient. She knows not to wake me during the nightmares, knows not to ask too many questions about the war. We have 2 kids now, both boys. I watch them play in the yard, and I'm grateful. Grateful for this normal life. But part of me is still in that water, will be until the day I die. I don't talk about it much. What's there to say? People hear USS Indianapolis and they know the ship that delivered the atomic bomb, the ship that got torpedoed, the sharks. It's become a legend, a horror story. But it wasn't a story. It was real. It was men dying slowly in the sun, going mad from thirst, being torn apart by sharks while the rest of us watched and waited for our turn. 900 men went into the water the night of July 30th, 1945. 316 came out. I was one of the lucky ones, they say. But I've been dying in that water for 14 years, and I'll keep dying in it for the rest of my life. Some nights when I close my eyes, I can still feel them bumping against my legs. The sharks never really left.